Hello, everyone. Nice seeing you here today. My name is Rhett Burton, and I'm going to be doing a quick little Pecha Kucha style, short presentation style of around 20 slides of how I put the present, past, future, all into sort of being here and now in teaching English, teaching TESOL in South Korea. And I'm going to start off with a slide called Bootstrapping, How to Cultivate Competence from Ignorance. And this whole presentation stems from a conversation about 10 to 15 minutes with Mr. Andre, the Gyeonggi TESOL chapter, KOTESOL chapter president. And together we sat around and we talked about good ideas, bad ideas, shitty ideas, volatile ideas, and we sort of weighed different options for things that we could and couldn't do, or should and shouldn't do, or would be willing to do. And it was really fun talking with him because in short 10, 15 minutes, we had a great conversation. We laughed, we didn't cry, and we kept things within the rails of, say, what we're both willing to do. And we came up with the title, How to Cultivate Competence from Ignorance. And the next thing I did was I went to ChatGPT, because that seems to be what everyone does. And I quickly typed in to the chat prompt, I'm like, how to cultivate competence from ignorance? How can I briefly explain this concept? And it told me bootstrapping means starting with almost nothing, just potential. Now, I did kind of change this a little bit because to me, ChatGPT gets a little bit too wordy. So I wanted to cut out a few things, and this is what I came up with. But honestly, it doesn't really mean much because as a human, as a 40-year-old, 45-year-old man, I would like to start where I want to start. I want to use my own creative control to sort of flip-flop around into time and space that I feel most comfortable with. So I picked up on the word ignorance, and I thought, yes, ignorance is bliss. And I remember, and I sort of put a picture of a baby there floating in the water, ready to explore the world, ready to discover the world, and ready to reflect upon whatever comes my way. As the room got smaller and smaller, as I heard voices from the outside talking to me, calling me out, and whenever I popped out, I was ready to explore. And I was greeted there by my grandparents and my father on my mother's side, on my mother's side, and on my father's side. And I right then I thought, well, I need to start up with change the frame from starting with almost nothing to starting with everything you got, and it's more than you know. Because when I was sitting there, as I was sitting there as a baby, of course I know nothing. I'm practically nobody, but I'm somebody to my parents. I'm somebody to my grandparents, and they were very willing to give me all the love that I needed to sort of learn how to crawl, learn how to cry, learn how to smile, learn how to giggle. And so it brings me to my grandma's birthday. Her and I both, on that day, we both share the same birthday. And for my whole life, every time I celebrate my birthday, I think about her. And she always hummed This Little Light of Mine. And I never knew that until a few years ago. I knew that my grandma hummed a lot, but I didn't know what she was really humming because, well, it was a private endeavor that she did for herself. And just recently I learned that she actually hummed This Little Light of Mine, and it really felt nice because that's what I hum to myself quite often as well. So I have this shared connection. I discovered a shared connection to my grandmother through my mother, through the chant, or the chant, This Little Light of Mine. And perhaps that's what called me up out of my mom. Now, one thing when I think about love, I often think of, say, Maslow, because there is some theory in this. And you know, Maslow is one of the first people I learned about in psychology in university. And you learn about this psychological needs and safety, love and belonging, esteem and self-actualization. So you kind of get a little bit of a learning, like 1%. Who is Maslow? Oh, Maslow is somebody who has a hierarchy of needs. Is it correct? Well, I don't really know. I'm too young to really know what is up and what is down half the time. And then, but at the same time, you as you live your life, you read other books, you read other stories. And one of my favorite stories that I bought for my mother quite a few years ago was Love You Forever by Robert Munsch. And he's an American Canadian storyteller. And all through my childhood, my whole childhood was brought to life by his stories. So I was exploring his stories. I was discovering new things about his stories and about life and love. But then you sit down sometimes and you're like, well, who's right? Maslow puts love third on the list, and Robert Munsch maybe says that everything is all about love. And then you start to wonder, well, is Maslow correct, or is Love You Forever more correct? But in the end, you're like, you can't dive forever deep into one concept. You have to, pick it up, think about it for a bit, and put it down. So yes, Maslow is good. Love You Forever is good, but I'm going to just put it down and keep progressing through, learning new things about the world. So now I'm going to jump back to when I was a little boy and Love You Forever. And one reason why I bought that book for my mother is because I do love her, and I do want to love her forever because she sang to me, because I have a love of her voice. I love the song, the sound of her voice. Well, more so as a baby, less so as a grown man, for a variety of different reasons. But for me in this picture, my mother was everything to me. But my sister, my younger sister, my older sister was also there with me. And she sang songs like, open, shut them, open, shut them. And I learned partially through her words, through my actions, our words, our actions, our songs, they sort of all blended together in sort of a way of being with mother, a way of being with my sister. And, me plus her compelled us to explore and discover my head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And all these songs are part of my school, part of my curriculum, part of how I create an embodied experience for them. And these experiences are, right from my childhood. Like I remember, well, I don't remember being a child this age, but I do have now experience raising my sons and using strategies. And I think, and I believe, I trust that if I'm using these strategies, my parents use these strategies. And if they were using them, I can talk to them and we can have these shared connections with my sisters. So I can continue to have better conversations with my family about the way that we were raised in language, with the materials that we had together. And partial learning sometimes comes to our imagination. We paint things in our mind. So mystery box, what's inside the mystery box? So that tune kind of finds the pathway in the brain, and you learn to love that song, you sing that song, but at the same time, you're opening and closing the doors, playing peekaboo with your sister, playing peekaboo with yourself, finding something new every time you open up that box. Well, it wasn't really a box. It was actually some sort of table stand for my dad's books and cigarettes and ashtray. It was the 80s. But this whole idea of, my hands and my ears tell me and my eyes that they are right. So the feedback loops that I'm getting with my hands and my ears and my eyes are all working in tandem to create that sort of visual imagination to think with. And it's quite powerful. And as I get older, you know, the music to my ears went from like something like my mom's voice to the Mystery Box song to something a little bit more out of a Guns N' Roses CD. And so Maslow, for me to task actualize myself, perhaps I was listening more to tapes and CDs from that time period, more than my mother's or my teachers. And they helped me to self-actualize. So here's a picture of me all proud of my black eye. And my mom asked me, you know, what happened to your eye? And I'm joking around when I say, I made the space safe, but you should see my friend. Your friend? And the reason why I say safe space is because once upon a time in the 80s, I never heard anything about safe space. I never heard anything like that. I just went in and we did what we did for the reasons that we did. And sometimes we got in trouble, sometimes we didn't. But my friends taught me how to fight. You know, I gave him a black eye. He gave me a black eye. Why did we give each other black eyes? No good reason that any adult would understand. But I stand by my rationale still to this day. And those are things that, well, that music to my ears made me into who I am. And some of these songs that I listen to, many of the songs that I listen to from the 80s and 90s and 2000s have wired themselves inside my psyche, inside my body. And without those songs, I would not be able to do some of the things that I must do today. And but it's just not my playlist playing. You know, I often think about my grandma's playlist and how she used to sing This Little Light of Mine. I also think a little bit about the fathers at war and how they used to sing, you know, the battles of New Orleans. In 1814, we took a little trip along the Colonel Jackson down to Mighty Mississippi. And, you know, these songs are scripts. They enter your brain. They teach you what to do when you need to do it. So sometimes I think like my grandma and I sing This Little Light of Mine. Sometimes I think like my grandpa and father and I sing the Battle of New Orleans. And sometimes I think about my sisters as teenage girls in the car singing, I'm a bitch, I'm a child, I'm a mother, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm a saint. Because all these sort of, if I want to know you better, then sometimes I should know the songs better. Now, this is me thinking about me. This isn't me thinking about my students. And my students, you know, because I teach young learners, I want them to be able to take a song and construct a playlist of music for their own, for them to discover how best to be creative with music in the classroom for the context that we're in. So I take a song like A is for Apple, Apple, that sort of paints the whole library, or not the whole, paints every letter from A to Z. And then slowly we learn parts of different songs. I like to eat apples and bananas. So they only need to learn 1% of that song to really understand that small little bit. And then we flip to the next, we move on to the next song. Ball, bear. And, you know, through ball, we learn the B sound. And then C is peekaboo. I see you. So gradually when they see apple, they think of apple and banana. When they see ball, they think bounce, 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 or boing, boing, boing. So they have all these associations to these sounds, to these songs, and it wires the brain through the dopamine that we get, you know, the music to our ears, the love of music. And it's very important. So better than some of the songs that you get in some of the textbooks, you take songs that are out there in the wild that they're likely to hear. And these songs I have on this playlist, they're taught at many of their kindergartens, at many of their elementary schools, and I don't know about middle school. I teach one middle school student, but we don't learn these songs together with her. But we did. We started from the start, and we progressed into more advanced songs through middle school. But coming back a little bit to my first job, after I graduated from high school, I went to university. After I graduated from university, I came to South Korea. When I came to South Korea, I had all this sort of information, all this sort of knowledge about things that was being taught to me, shown to me. But here I had to start making sense of it all. And and when I sit down and think about what I know, I have no idea what I know. All I know is I got a whole bunch of threads all thrown about, and I have to find a way to start organizing myself. And as did my boss, as did my wanjangnim at the time. So, to find an end to start with or start from where you are, those are the kind of two quick strategies. And my boss kind of just threw me in, and it was sink or swim. He gave me the book, he gave me the schedule, and he gave me the students. And then I had to loop around that. I had to jump into it, use what I had known through all the years of life that I had in kindergarten, in middle school, in elementary school, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, university, and all the little side jobs. I had to use all that information, and I had to think about what was relevant so that I could swim and not sink. I framed it as eat, eat, exercises, activities, tasks. And now that we're eating it, what's the past tense of it? Ate. So I'm discovering the exercises, I'm discovering the activities, I'm discovering the tasks. But after that, after I consumed it, I'm like, well, I ate it. It's like, how does it taste? What was it like? The application? How much was I spending too much time on the task, or how was the engagement? I had to figure that out. And I had to figure most of that out by myself. And my manager, or my wanjangnim, he made me the supervisor of the school of the foreign teachers after like 2 years. Even though I did not have a TESOL certificate, even though I didn't have any formal education, I did become the supervisor at that school. Now, one reason why I did become the supervisor is because he needed a boy who could jump in and who was willing to learn the ropes by following his clear path. Now, I talked about those tangled strings, but that was me at 20. The 50-year-old, 60-year-old man, he already knew how to weave his tapestry the way that he wanted. He knew what he wanted me to do, but he needed somebody willing to do it. Now, did he know how to do it himself? No. He was a military advisor. He grew up, he was a career general or a career military man. But he knew that young men were willing to jump in, willing to do the part and to do the thing. Now, doing the thing was difficult, and he could not teach me that. But he gave me the time, the place, and the money to figure that out. And I was willing to figure it out. Now, there's two main strategies at the school. One, get the book, follow the schedule, keep the kids happy through the main core textbook. The other strategy was, we have a library of books, grab them as they fit the curriculum and bring them and take them as you need. And I've always liked the storybook better than the textbook. And even after years and years of growing up, I've always felt that the storybook is much better because it has so much more on tap. It has so much more available for people to see the parts in the wholes. Now, I don't know if you know this story, The Seven Blind Mice, and I'm not here to tell it to you, but I can tell you that these little mice, all 7 of them, have to go in and discover They have to explore and discover and reflect on what they found. And they have to talk to their peers. They have to talk to everyone. And they have to learn to agree that what it is what it is. But how do they do it when they all feel and sense something different? Well, they lived in a high trust environment where all the mice were really working together to figure out what it was so that they could build it, so they could be better with the thing that they were with. And they do. And this little white mouse at the very end, he listens to what everyone says without fighting, without going to World War III. They all figured it out that it was an elephant. And all the other mice too listened to the white mouse and decided to go out for themselves and to make sense of all the different parts. And this story, it helps build a high trust environment. And that is something we desperately need today more than anything. Because, well, we all know that when you zoom out, that the mice have many scripts for things. You know, on one they have little rabbit Foo hopping through the forest, picking up all the field mice and bopping them on the head. Well, or maybe the three blind mice see how they run, and there's a farmer's wife chasing them around with a carving knife. Perhaps, you know, they're outside of the boundaries of where they should be. Maybe we need some sort of fairy godmother to come and change, to kind of put a better, you know, spell on things so that we can, you know, bring down the noise so that we can have more signal. And honestly, the one strategy that I had to do that, most of my friends at the hogwan industry couldn't do that because they came and left so often. So I had to buy a book because better information was found in books. And the book, I could keep the book. I could revisit the book, and I could gradually 1%, 2% figure out how that book was aligning to what was happening in my classroom. And then I learned about Piaget, and I learned about a little bit about Vygotsky. I can't write an essay about these people, or I couldn't. Maybe now I could. But at the time, it was just a little bit. And that little bit of information helped me to frame a better direction and have better conversations. And then gradually over time, I learned about KOTESOL, and I met Robert Murphy. And Robert Murphy has, you know, sent me links. I asked him questions, and he sent me links to some of the articles he's written, some of the research he's written, some of his thesis. And then as I read it over time, I see things more clearly. But at the same time as me seeing things more clearly, things get a lot more fuzzy too. So I don't really know how to, you know, to weigh the good and the bad, or weigh the good with the good in my context. And it just takes a lot of time and energy. And that's why one of my favorite expressions in Korean is 동인지 된장인지 모른다, because it's all about knowing your shit. You know, here we have a picture of who pooped on my head, and here's a picture of, you know, the good doenjang to make that good hearty soup. But you're always in some sort of negotiation with things, with people. And things are quite easy. You know, you can master something and use it very easily, like picking up these scissors. You can learn how to put your fingers in. It's clear how to use these. And over time, you can master the scissors. But people, on the other hand, are not, they're far more complex. Like, I had no idea. You could learn the word like 장모님, mother-in-law. You can learn the word 장인 어른. But who are they? Well, that's a whole iceberg of tradition and culture and language and use. And it's always like fight and flee and fawn. And it's very dynamic. And that dynamicness is that you're having with the elders are the same sort of interactions that you're having with students. But we have to find ways to model good practices so that when grandpa gets too angry, or when the kids get too chaotic, that we can create common space, common ground, not safe space. We need common space. We need space that we can all, grab that sort of touchstone and say, yes, this is real. This is what we need. This is what we do. And if not, then sometimes we need to learn how to close the windows and shut the doors and say, it's time to hide a little bit because there's too many cats and there's little Bonnie Foo-Foo's out there with its club and we can't go out quite yet. But the sun will rise again, and let's be ready for that. So I do want to say thank you to KOTESOL, and part of the future of my journaling process is that I grab pictures from my past. I put them next to pictures of my present, of my future, with my students who have stuck with me for a long time. And we work together and we do presentations and we take things that the researchers are saying and we apply it together, and we save this information so that we can link to it, so that we can rewatch it and hear ourselves speak about certain topics at different different stages of growth. So I have videos of Lisa speaking English in kindergarten that I have in grade 2 and grade 3, all the way to middle school. And together I don't know if I like the word manufacturing expression, but we're creating sort of episodic memories together, and then we're semantically fulfilling them by talking about it from different perspectives, from different angles, from different points of view, so that maybe we can be more wise with who we are with. And we keep rotating around. We keep doing it again and again. And at Gyeonggi, the multicultural conference, we talked about the yearbook, and we drew pictures about it, and we made videos about it, and we talked about it. And then this year, 2 years later, she quoted me something from Oranges and Lemons, and she linked it to 1984. And it was I wasn't too sure if it was a coincidence or if it was like, what's that word, to have sync. I can't even remember the word. So I'll pass. I apologize. I often forget. But together, I'm learning with my students as they move forward, as I come back, as we both move forward together, as we collect things that we're both interested in and bringing them together for multi-generational conversations. And I'm very thankful that there are people like Andre out there and KOTESOL that gives me a platform to share and to work with students in these kind of ways. And I look forward to doing more of it in the future. So thank you and have a great day. Well, let's do a little round table. Give everybody a little bit of time and space to share something or poke at a word or poke at a mistake or.
I have a question. So if you've gone through the whole process of creating the slides and then presenting the slides. So now that you've been through the whole process, how would you sum it up? How would you say, how do you bootstrap, basically?
Well, you use what you got. You use what you got right now, and all that you have right now, that's what you use. If you don't have it, don't even think about it. Maybe you can go out, maybe you'll discover it along your way, but start with who you are and how you are with others. So I didn't try to reinvent my one-time in school because I knew that I knew nothing. So I had to be willing to learn the ropes first and foremost, and to build that skill and to learn that knowledge. But so at the start of my career, I just jumped in and just did, all right, I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. But as a 45-year-old man, now I'm more weighing like, well, if we're going to do it, who's in or who's not in? If we're going to do it, who has the right tools or the right mindset to be able to do it. I'm not willing to just jump into any mass movement and say, we're off to the races today and we can do it. We can do it, because I think that's a bunch of BS. Don't sign me up.
Okay, so once you do that, once you get in the situation and you use what you've got, how do you build on that to get to the next level? I mean, obviously you gain experience as you go through the process, but how do you step up? Because to step up means that you have to be self-aware and then look back at what you've done and build another step, right? So how do you do that? How do you self-reflect yourself out of ignorance, basically?
Well, in regards to this conversation, that I will, because it's recorded, I will go back and I will listen to it, and I'll be like, oh, I said this, I shouldn't say that. I may have meant this, or I should rearrange these slides a little bit. So that's what I will do in this context. In at school, say, okay, let's rewind to say when I was working at elementary school, I taught one class and I taught it 5 times. And so the first time I taught it, I realized that I made certain errors, or I could improve my lesson certain ways. So then I would switch it up for my next class. And then I would do it the next class, and I could compare my last class to my next class by just rearranging a few things or making a few quick changes. And then the third class and fourth class, I would slowly, in that same day, fine tune how I was interacting with the students. Yes, the students somewhat changed and I had slightly different arrangements, but I learned how that little PowerPoint or lesson plan really worked as a little finely tuned machine. But then by the end of it all, I realized that I did it so mechanically that I lost all the fun that I had in the first lesson. So sometimes you have to put that lesson down and start again fresh, because then you're not trying to get too mechanical on that lesson plan. So you still have that free creative exploration and discovery mode.
Cool.
But it's actually really difficult in the hog one, because at the hog one, every day is a new page. Every day is a new thing. So sometimes you're in the hog one, you can tend to put yourself on some sort of spinning wheel and you never get any real traction over things. So you should be mindful who you're working with in the hog one, and be mindful of the schedule, and if you do have concerns, then stand up, put up your hand and say, can we change this or better understand things? Like I said, I didn't try to fix my hog one. I just tried to better navigate when I was within it by having conversations with the other head teachers, with the ones I named who never participated in the how to teach aspect.
Thanks, Red.
Uh, so it sounds like a lot of your teacher development was in short bits here and there. You teach a lesson, and then you'd go, well, this worked, but this didn't. Your mind would flag certain things of, that's interesting. You'd make an improvement, but it wasn't an improvement, it made things worse, and that you were more or less responding almost like a stand-up comic to developing a set, that they do the set and the killer laugh that they think happens doesn't happen, and so they try it a few more times before it works, or they reject it or something like that. Was it almost like there are hors d'oeuvres, that you're selecting hors d'oeuvres, reading a little Maslow here, a little Murphy there, and kind of letting it triggers something, instead of reading a full article by Skihan or by Ellis or by Willis or whatever the case may be. Is that a correct way of describing your process of bootstrapping?
So my first 10 years, I had no formal training, no awareness of TESOL or KOTESOL. And then I never even, and then only in year 16 did I go out and I get a TESOL certificate, which I took 3 times consecutively so I could wrap my mind around the concepts and the practice and my craft. But what you're describing is I went from practice to theory because I had no idea what the theory was, but it was all just practice. And the practice that I was getting was somewhat co-created with the audience at that time of delivery. So yes, I would say that a lot of part of my teaching was what you described. Now I can't say now I kind of feel ashamed of saying it took me 16 years to get a TESOL certificate that you could have done online in a matter of weeks. But that didn't always exist. I couldn't just up and take a TESOL course at that time. So I got caught up into these other sort of pathways because, I'm like the 6 mice or the 7 mice trying to figure out how do I navigate the new world that I was living in. Part of me was out with friends. Part of me was learning languages. Part of me was reading books about Korea. And part of me was inline skating and skiing and doing physical activities. Like I had a whole bunch of different selves. And then gradually through that aggregate of sense making, I was able to relate better to Koreans using my English, their stories, and then compressing it into something that was, I don't know, co-created in a way. And then later on, the books started to come in because this sort of, my bit got old per se. And it got too stale or got too old. Or maybe I should say that I got more and more interested in the what was under the hood. The flashiness of the car wasn't enough. Now I really wanted to see how the car worked.
It also sounds like there's a lot of what you were doing where you're coming in not necessarily with the official lesson plan or the thing that the boss wants you to do. You're instead coming into an environment and kind of savoring the environment, savoring the book that you're using, savoring Korea in general. With your life and kind of responding to that as a lot of your means by which you came to understand this field more.
To be honest, I feel like that was the natural sort of world that I was living in at that time. Mm-hmm. It's like 1980 was not 1990, 1990 was not 2000. And here I am in 2020, and people are saying, you have to follow the plan to the T. You have to dot every I, cross every T, and check every task that you do. And then it's like, well, are we becoming robots in this classroom? And then in the past, like, are we becoming the tape recorder? Are we becoming the robot? Are we becoming the trainer of AI units? Like, it's like, yes, you're right, we are. But that's not who I am. So I want to be free flowing with the students because that's the cutting edge of humanity. But we will have these databases collecting massive amounts of information on our trails at all times.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies if I went off the rails a little bit. I always do.
What he said familiar. A lot of things. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Like that experience of going into a Hagwon and bringing your previous self, basically, not really having a good idea of what you're supposed to be doing, what you're meant to do, and just doing it. And I mean, yeah, I can relate to that. I did it in a bunch of different environments where I sometimes went in and I'm like, I don't really know if I can do this, but somehow pulled it off. And again, what he said about learning, starting with practice, and the theory came later, often much later, because as he said, those courses just weren't around when I started. And so, yeah, I found a lot of what he said very familiar, similar to what I went through.
I'm happy that it's familiar, because when it's familiar, then it feels more real. And when it's unfamiliar, then it's like, well, it's novel, and it's in that novelty that we sort of like, we haven't, it's not tried, tested, and true. And if it's not tried, tested, and true, then as an older man, I'm more reluctant. I push it back a little bit. As a younger man, I would have been far more open with things, because that's who I was. I would have jump in first and learn to swim later. But then after a few years, you realize that no, you should put your toe in first. Check how deep that water is. See if you can see what the signs say, or make up your own signs so that you don't get washed away in the current, or you don't break your neck swinging from the rope, or all those other little things you hear about as a child, or you witnessed as a child growing up in the 80s. But like, which is a big concern of mine, because these days there's signs everywhere, and that children don't really have the playground to learn how to catch and play and swing and climb and learn all those basic sort of 3D world skills. And it's the digital, we're slowly jumping into the digital playground, and that's, to me, quite scary. Even for myself, that's quite scary.
Yeah, that's true.
It's my parenting experience.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Yes, no, thanks, Red. That was very enjoyable, and like Martin said, I could relate to it in my own experience. It felt familiar to me. As for a point to raise, well, I wrote down your first phrase. Everything you've got, it's more than you know, and I found that very pithy, because if you ask yourself the question like, what is it to know? Well, you might find it a challenge to come to like to be definite on what it is to know anything. But with that thing, what everything you've got, well, to just give an example of the things we've got, like in the classroom, they're the songs and the storybooks within our culture. We might not know them completely, what they are. You just have to go out and look for them, and you'll find a whole plethora, let's just say, of songs and storybooks, and they and to compare or contrast that wealth of material with, say, a structured syllabus like a course book, and how that is something that someone knows. They sat down and have given themselves a task of designing a course, and how it can sort of be quite inadequate compared to the wealth that's available in the songs and the storybooks. And I think your point was that there is so much more potential in that wealth, than perhaps the course book, because it's just, a course book is just this little thing that someone knows, and they've done their best to encapsulate all of like the language structure and its vocabulary, and it often fails to like really interest the learner. And so, unlike how songs and storybooks can do a much better job, and you can sometimes in the past I've been very lucky to just do the most basic of activity with songs and storybooks, which is just the random word deletion. You can delete just random words from a text that you source from some song or storybook, and the discovery that follows in trying to put the word, fill in the gaps, can surpass any known course book with its deliberate aims. So I hopefully that you'll I'm sure you'll agree with that. If I've been able to get it across, but that's what I that's what's familiar with me, or that's what resonates with me. That those points.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend the other day about the textbook versus this novel that I'm reading called Momo. And she was like, I do like my textbook because it's all laid out so neat and orderly, and it has sort of good context for good things, sort of how they need to, how it all fits together. Like, it's tried, tested, and true. but then I said, well, I like reading Momo, because, well, if you read chapter 5, there's a blueprint for mass movements. And if you read chapter 4, you'll learn that how people sort of mentally map out how they're going to achieve something. If you read chapter 6, we're going to find out how it all falls apart because we don't really know the future. So I really appreciate how just free reading gives, but I'm coming to that as somebody now in my 40s. But the first time when you read, say, a simple book like The Elephant, the Seven Blind Mice, and then you slowly just add story on story on story, then you come out with this whole sort of paradox of contradictions and things. So you're going right and you're going left, and you're perfectly okay handling that sort of chaos, handling that randomness, because you've seen it before in books and in your imagination. So you use your imagination to paint it, to discover it. And when you read those books, when you put in time, you're actually training your brain to be good with it, or to be okay with it. But when you're spoon-fed through like the textbook, that you get that learned helplessness that is right from the get-go always. So then you don't want to end up as a 45-year-old man saying, my textbook isn't working anymore because the society has moved on. I don't know how, I can't even read this textbook because it's too different than what I know. And by taking the novel approach, or the book approach, or the story approach, you'll see how things are so random, so paradoxical all the time that it actually changes normal.
Yeah, no way.
So I do. What you said to me is very familiar to me as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. I don't teach anymore. I used to be a teacher. I'm here by curiosity, out of curiosity. So.
Well, what are you curious about?
Just how teachers see teaching. I used to teach online. I'm not a native speaker, so I used to be one of those teachers who would teach online. I never taught in a real class, so.
I have a girl I teach online. She went from kindergarten in class, and then during COVID, she moved online, and we've forever been online since then.
Well, I was a freelancer, and it was going quite well, but it all kind of ended during the pandemic. That's when my business stopped working, because lots of native speakers turned to teaching online. So my job was a little bit, the competition was suddenly overwhelming. So I just decided to take a sabbatical, and that sabbatical, turned into 4 years already. I'm not teaching, but I am nostalgic about it, and I'm thinking about going back to teaching.
Well, I'm nostalgic to hear how you sort of used your sabbatical to sort of like feel out who you want to be every day.
To do what? I'm sorry.
I'm curious on how you bring joy into your life on your sabbatical, because sometimes when we get going into this job, we fill our time and our schedule with teaching. Well, what happens when you turn off the lights on teaching a little bit?
Well, with teaching, it was getting a little bit, I kind of felt that I needed to take a break because I was quite successful. I was good at it. I had become good at it. Kids would love me. But then I felt like I had reached a plateau and there was no way up for me from there. And also I was kind of starting to imitate myself. So I was just being this persona. I was just imitating myself, basically, every day. And it didn't feel like fun anymore. It used to be really fun in the beginning because I would have good connection with my students, mostly children. So it felt really good to just stop pretending to be this person because it felt like it wasn't me anymore. And now I just tapped into a different domain. I started learning finance and all other kinds of things that I was interested in. And yeah, I really liked just sitting quiet, no talking, just sitting, reading, doing my thing.
I think I
That's
have a
what I
question.
enjoy.
I think I have a question for Julia then.
Hmm.
How much when you were teaching online, how much interaction did you promote? This was on Zoom? Was it one-on-one or was it groups?
It was both. So I was working with this Chinese online school, and they had group classes, also one-on-ones. The student would have to like you, would have to choose to pick you to have a one-on-one with you, and those were paid better. But I would also have my own business on the side. So those were one-on-one, and I was using Skype back then.
Oh, okay.
And whiteboard, online whiteboard, or even Windows has this, I think it's called Notes, and it's interactive. The student can join the whiteboard, and we can draw together, we can write together, that was really nice.
At least with on Zoom, there are ways of promoting interaction by using breakout rooms, etc. There was a whole drama-based course that I was going to teach, but then COVID happened and I had to teach it on Zoom. And in the process of doing that, I had all these improv games with people doing them in breakout rooms, and I didn't really see what was going on that much, but it was enough for them to be motivated and to interact, etc. So there's all kinds of possibilities for you to come back into teaching while making it interesting for yourself. And if you want to bring in finance, that's cool. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Yeah, I am thinking about it.
I can relate to how so because I've been teaching young learners for 20 years, 20 plus years, I sort of developed a persona, and I may have changed that language to an NPC, a non-player character, that my non-player character interacts with these students because I'm so somewhat used to the way that I want to be with them, and I can keep myself contained. But I thought I could do that. But what happened was these new post-COVID students, to me, seem less familiar. And because they're less familiar, I actually don't really know how to, I don't know how to grip and grasp and to sort of utilize the class best because, well, I think that children have changed a lot. And I'm curious to see how other people, and I feel like university students or university teachers can feel it a little bit, but I don't think they know what's coming through the pipeline in these new generations of say iPad kids or special needs kids or la 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 la.
I was in the maybe university that was in COVID, so we are COVID generation. When I was in high school, they're all wearing a mask so they can interact each other. But after the COVID ends, we cannot interact more familiar or kindness to interact each other. So there's something anger and something conflict is so huge so that I cannot interact effectively to its friends or colleagues.
I wonder
See,
if
once
that's
upon a
gonna.
time, I think, once upon a time, I think that there used to be, a bunch of, 5 friends, and one friend was the tough kid, and one friend was the comic relief, and one friend was the straight and narrow kind of guy. And together those friends could, push each other in or pull each other out. But these days, things have become so singular that we're trying to be everything all at once, and we don't even know who we are in it. And I rely on Roger. Sorry, Russell, Roger. Sorry, Roger. I rely on Roger to take some of the pressure off me. So because I know I can punch him, and I know that he'll take my punch, which is not a real punch. It's just a jab. It's just a joke. It's just something. He will take it and he'll spin it around and throw it back at me in a way that makes things laugh and friendly and fun. And then, you know, when you have like this group of people who know how to interact with each other, then it's quite fun and friendly. But that is, you learn it from by interacting with each other all the time. And children are not they're interacting more with the book than with the children because teachers know what's best all the time. Sorry for interrupting you, Andre.
No, that's fine. It's not an interruption. Actually, I have a question to all the educators and educated here. Because what you're talking about makes sense because the kids tend to interact with devices a lot these days. So interacting with other people is something that they have to learn, especially post-COVID, like Luke said. And that's one side of it. The other side of it, meaning that we have to compete with these kinds of things that kids interact with for their attention. So that's really hard because I'm not nearly as interesting as the stuff that they're watching, right? So one of the strategies to deal with that is to force the kids to interact with each other, which is weird for them. So that brings me to the question. In this new environment, what is the quality that we as real life teachers bring in the class that the kids wouldn't be able to get on their devices, basically? Because everybody's afraid these days of losing their jobs to AI, right? So there has to be something that we bring the kids can't find. So what do you think that is?
For me, I'll start first. For me, I bring my hands, and my hands are both, you know, they look all caring, but they can get hard very quickly. And the kids, they don't want to fight, but they want to fight. They want to be boys, and I let them be it. And sometimes the boys get in trouble, and I'm like, well, that's okay. But then, you know, the moms come in a little bit and put pressure on me, and it's like, and I don't really know. So you have to somewhat keep parents out and keep kids in circles to protect the kids from the things outside. But it has to be open enough where the parents do understand why that rough and tumble play needs to happen, why kids want to fight each other and play and hold hands and somewhat hurt each other, but at the same time protect each other. That there needs to be much more of that hand-on-hand sort of environment. And that's what I think. But I know that a lot of people will say, no, we need a safe space. We need to protect everyone from everybody. And I say, that's a bunch of horseshit.
Well, right. You're,
Rod-
I think, yes.
Okay, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, you bring in surprise, a little bit of spontaneity. If you have a textbook in the class, you don't just do what's in the textbook because they'll kind of nod and go, okay, I see what's going on. I know what's going on. If you vary what you do enough, they will get to the point where they realize, okay, something new is about to happen. If something new is about to happen, they'll be a little bit more motivated to listen to what you have to offer in the class, to engage with the lesson, etc. There are many points in a typical textbook, if it has a lot of text, where you can diverge here, where you can use the book in a way that is not prescribed by the book. There just a way the book says something doesn't mean that you do it in the way that the book said. And so those kinds of changes, I'm sure you'd be doing those kinds of changes in the class, but also adding things too. And as long as we try to interact with as many students as possible one-on-one, even if it's like for 4 or 5 seconds, I think that raises the profile of the class rather than thinking, oh, I need to be on my phone. In my class, I don't see a lot of people on their phones. It does happen, They have an important conversation with their boyfriends or girlfriends on while chatting. That kind of thing does occur. So as long as you try to make it interesting, come in with something that's interesting, you're able to compete a little bit more. And you can always call on the kid that's scrolling on his phone and go, "Hey, Taehoon, what do you think?" True. That's right. So that's something we look forward to. Our job is to be more interesting on the phone, and we can all be more interesting than a smartphone. We're 3D. So there you go.
Bring the surprise.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
want to
Thanks.
say that at my school, there's these big fluffy mats on the ground, and they just beg the kids to rough and tumble play and roll around and all that. And as soon as their feet are on those mats, they're so compelled to do all those little jumping actions that it's hard to keep the monkey down, the monkey spirit out of them.
I was into this about playing in the nature because everyone in the high school or middle school was just under the table and trying to do some homework. So I just the only person who was just slapping around, fell down, or just running around in the nature. And that helps me a lot have a very mindset, very helpful to just calm down or just my health is better, something else. Yes.
Always a good idea. Mhm.
So maybe interacting with nature could be a good idea, like a school trip in the nature would be a great idea.
Yeah. Thanks, Lou.
Maybe I should take a stab at that question. What can teachers bring to a classroom that AI can't? Well, it probably can do this better than we can, but not yet, not immediately, which is just this to answer the thing, to scaffold learners' interaction with one another. So if you have learners interact with one another, if you have like a short list of questions that they ask and answer to each other, the teacher can monitor and then scaffold their interaction with one another. So I suppose AI is probably going to be able to do that better when it can, but that's what we ought to be doing, like as a matter of routine anyway, as sort of like contemporary English teachers or language teachers, is scaffolding learners' interaction with one another. And I went and fished out one of my books here to clarify to you what scaffolding is, but you all might be aware of that word scaffolding. I wasn't until I did a teacher training course, but we're probably all aware of like the teacher's role as a scaffolder, or what scaffolding is in like contemporary language teaching. It's not, it's to have learners interact with one another, and the teacher scaffolds their interaction, their output. So I have no doubt that AI, those LLMs will be able to do it better than we can one day, but not immediately. Certainly not at the immediate present in the classroom where I work. I mean, ChatGPT is there on the computer that we can project, on the board, and you can ask and answer questions. But as yet, it's not like turned on, the microphone's
Not
on,
at the
mic on.
participatory level.
What
Not
did
at
you
the
say?
They won't be able to do it at the participatory level. The real student to student interaction, the participation of it. They can't do that yet.
Not yet, yes, but not yet. Yes, I know, but that I don't know what it will become, because like when let me leave this antidote aside, because it's just a trivial antidote. But I've no I've, that I once thought that the robotic intelligence that I was a kid and loved so much in the Astro Boy comic world would just never eventuate, and it seems as though we're on the cusp of realizing it or seeing it realized in the world today. That robotic intelligence, where they are robots like active in our lives and we need to contend with them. I never thought that would become a reality. And even though it mightn't be in the mechanical sense, there mightn't be mechanical robots operating as well as those fictional beings did in those stories, but the artificial intelligence, it seems to be there like it was in those. So I resisted the anecdote about what science fiction like was for me as a boy and what the world has become since like 2 years ago when ChatGPT became like a thing to use. But I've just given up my what is the word? My it's not my doubts about it are not I don't I'm just completely open to a future that might actually be the dream that we had as children, exposed to like robotic cartoons where robots interacted with people. It's probably going to happen, but I never thought it would. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I want one too. Okay.
Uh,
mm.
I'm sorry. There's a short story called "The Fun We Had" by Isaac Asimov.
Oh,
That is that it's about these kids in the future that learn at home. They have this sort of robot come in, the robot teaches them, and they go, back in the old days, there were these things called schools, and you went in and there was like a human being standing up in front of the class, and they would write on paper. It's an interesting read, and that probably there should be an AI ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever is out there discussion someday at KOTESOL based around that story. But in the meantime, read it for your own fun. Bye-bye.